Good afternoon, everyone. This is Evaluating Job Offers and Salary Negotiation. I am Rachel Wilbrack. I am the program director that works with our College of Computer, Mathematical, and Natural Sciences. Jeffrey Cho is also here with me. He's my GA. He's a grad advisor within CMNS. He's going to be managing the chat for me today and participants and letting people in. So if you have questions as we go, please feel free, put them in the chat now. You don't have to wait till the end if you don't want to. If it's related to something I'm talking about, I've given him permission to break in and interrupt me and ask the question. If it's kind of broader range, we can wait, of course, to the end, but please use that chat feature to share any questions that you might have as we go. All right, so I'm gonna start first with evaluating job offers before we get into salary negotiations. So there's a lot of things to consider. I think most things that people think of, at least right off the bat, of course, salary. That's going to be the biggest thing that's probably when you're deciding potentially between multiple job offers, right? But I like to mention and talk about how it's not the only way to evaluate job offers that you're getting, because there can be a lot of other things that, of course, impact your decision as well. Benefits can be a big piece. If you have two competing job offers, a salary could be higher for one, but the other one offers a better health, vision, dental, prescription, whatever, and that might help sway you. The culture at that organization. You could have two job offers. One is an organization that is a little bit more casual, or another one might be a little bit more professional and expect you to wear a suit every day. It could be one where they have a culture of service, or they're really big into technology. Maybe not the biggest thing, but culture and how you fit in an organization can end up being a big thing after a while. So paying attention to the culture and not just, a couple of numbers right off the bat can be another way that can sway you as you're evaluating job offers with more than one organization, or even just looking at one job offer and saying, is this the right one for me, or do I want to hold out for other options? Location is another big one. Depending on if you are thinking about living in a specific area, offers in two different cities could affect your decision. Along with that, cost of living, commute, the living expenses that you might have in one location versus another. You could have two job offers in different cities. They could be the exact same salary, but that money could go further, of course, in one area than it does in another. I'm originally from Pennsylvania. My salary in Lancaster, Pennsylvania would go a little further than it does being right outside of DC, right? Or a salary that you might get in DC may go further in DC than it does in Seattle or somewhere on the West Coast, depending on where that is. Position and responsibilities. You could have competing job offers that are asking you to do different things. You could have more responsibility in one position than another. You could have different things that you're doing in these positions. Those can affect and be something to consider when you're evaluating jobs. The company brand, the notoriety, the prestige. This is not necessarily always important to everyone, and that's okay. But there are definitely some that want a company that has name recognition, that a lot of people are going to know, and they're going to want people to know when they say, I work for such and such, that they know what that organization is. They don't have to explain what that company or organization does. Professional development opportunities. Some organizations are better at this than others in the opportunity within your organization itself, or even money to go outside of your organization to seek professional development opportunities. Educational reimbursement. So not just for those professional development opportunities that might be like a conference or something, but even, are you looking to get another degree? Are you looking for a master's, a PhD? Is there a specific certificate or training that would help you do your job better? Are they willing to pay for that? Or, would they, require you to, work for so much time after they reimburse you for that? I know some organizations will just say, as long as you're employed with us, we'll pay for it. Others sometimes will say, once you finish that degree, you need to stick around for 6 months to a year afterwards, because they want to know that you're, using that education that you're getting to help their organization too, not just, yourself maybe at a different organization. Relocation reimbursement. If you're moving to another city or state, they may offer to give you money to help you make that move. A signing bonus potentially with some organizations. That's a way that they can give you a little bit more money up front, but then not have it have to be part of your salary every year, because that of course means they have to pay you more for more years. Amenities. So are there things that that organization has? Is it a larger company that has a place where you can go and grab food? Do they have a gym on site that you can use, before you get to work or after work or something like that? Are they close to public transportation? There's a lot of different things that could affect some of the amenities and how you think about an organization. And then this last one has always been something to consider, but of course now with a lot of us working from home and having remote work options, that's something that I think more people will want to look into if they've had the chance to practice that and do that now, like I've been doing and like I'm doing now. That's something I think more people will want to consider. And none of these on its own is like the most important. Usually, lots of times it's a combination of things. I find that you might be willing to give up a little bit in salary if you can get a better location or the better job that you're interested in, or maybe, and we'll talk about this when we get to salary negotiations, maybe they can't give you the upfront salary what you want, but they can give you a couple more days in vacation or something like that. Sometimes it's give and take, but just remembering there are a lot of things to consider when you are evaluating job offers that come in. All right, and I did see someone asked about the slide deck being available afterwards. I am recording this, so this will be on YouTube. If you want to see the slide deck specifically, my email will be at the end. Just shoot me an email and ask for the slides and I'll send them. I wasn't planning to send it out to everybody necessarily, but I'm happy to send it to anybody who wants to email me and ask for them. All right, I'm getting a couple of questions privately. If you could send those to Jeffrey, that would be great, just because I'm going to try to continue through the presentation and he's going to watch the questions for me, but I will answer the one that I got. Someone said they've used Glassdoor to help find a salary range, but sometimes you don't see the salary for a specific position. Absolutely, this is definitely a thing. Yeah, if you can't find it on Glassdoor, Glassdoor is kind of the most well-known. Other times there are resources that we can help out with. So the University Career Center is a member of the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and they create a salary guide every year. So not necessarily a specific position, but based on major, which can sometimes be helpful. Other times trying to find maybe friends, colleagues, or classmates that have gone on to that work for that organization. I think sometimes you can find information through LinkedIn as well. Sometimes it's just kind of using your best guess, or also you could try to look up other jobs that are similar, that are hiring. A lot of times they won't put a salary range in the job description when they're posting it, but some will. So if you can find enough other positions that are hiring for a very similar position that are listing a salary range, that can give you another way of potentially knowing what a salary range is before they tell you what their range is. All right. So a couple of questions that you might be thinking when evaluating a job offer. What do I do when I can't get all the factors that I want? You would be very lucky if you were able to get the salary you wanted in the location with the exact benefits, all the amenities. Like, it's not impossible, but chances are you're going to have to pick and choose which ones are going to make you the most happy. So obviously weighing your options, are you willing to take a job in a location that you're not as excited about, but you get to do the exact job that you want to do, maybe have some more responsibility. There's a lot of different ways, and just kind of comparing and thinking, like, are some of the things that aren't perfectly what you want, are those non-negotiables? Are those things that you're okay dealing with for a little while? Because chances are, if you end up with one organization, you won't stay there for your entire career, but just kind of weighing and finding out which options are things that you're willing to give up maybe for the time being, or things you're willing to live with until you can maybe make other opportunities happen for you. And then of course, there's always the option of doing a counter offer or negotiating. If it's the salary that's not exactly where you want it, having a conversation and seeing if you can get that number a little higher, closer to the range that you were looking for. Maybe they didn't initially offer a relocation or like reimbursement. Maybe that's something that you negotiate for. Maybe, like I mentioned earlier, they can't give you the salary they want, but they can give you something else. These are all kind of conversations that you could potentially have with either the hiring manager or the recruiter that you're working with, depending on the situation. All right, so another question or concern. I need to give one recruiter an answer, but I'm still waiting to hear about other offers that are coming in. So you have a couple different options, right? You could accept the offer and be super excited and know that this is the job that you're going to take. You could potentially decline this offer and wait for the others. Then, of course, you can always try to ask for more time. This is where I would start. Some organizations will be very open to this, and they want you to let them know by October 15th, and you reach out today, 10 days before that deadline, and you ask if you can have a little bit more time. Other organizations might say, no, October 15th is really our hard deadline. We need to know by then. But you won't know unless you ask. So that can definitely be an option. The other thing you can do is you can reach out to those organizations that you're still waiting to hear from and see if you can move their timetable up. You can point out that you have another offer that has a deadline before you expect to hear from them, and get an idea of are they planning to get back to you in a couple of days, a couple of weeks, because maybe those other offers would come in sooner. But if you are going to ask for more time for the organization that has an offer down, try to give them a little bit more time. If they do want an answer by October 15th, if you can, try to ask for more time before you hit the 15th, because they're expecting to hear from you from the 15th. And if you then come and say, hey, can I have more time? They might have to go to someone else and ask if you can have more time, and it can push their process back. It gives them a little bit more time to see if they can wait longer if you give them a couple of days heads up. All right. So the other thing that I didn't mention, why would I not want to accept an offer thinking I can always renege and take another job offer later? So a couple of different things. It could potentially burn bridges with you in that organization if you ever decided to work there in the future. Could potentially hurt your relationship with that recruiter. Recruiters move around. They work for different organizations. If it was an especially bad way that you handled it, they could remember you. And I mean, you think, that you're probably not the only person who has ever reneged, and that's true. But if it was especially bad, or if they were under, tight deadlines and they felt like you kind of hurt them, they can remember it. Could potentially hurt your chances with other organizations. Recruiters do tend to talk a little bit. They're at a lot of the same career fairs together. They're all in the same industry typically, if they're a bunch of different organizations you are looking at. It can also hurt other Maryland students, because that org, if it happens too many times that they get burned by students who accept an offer and then end up reneging and not taking it, it can mean that sometimes they're hesitant to recruit here again, which, something you want to think about. And of course, technically, on a large scale, maybe the first thing we should have thought about, it's not necessarily the most ethical decision to make, right? You're accepting an offer knowing that, you will be willing to drop them for something else. So that being said, I also want to point out that I am realistic, and I know that if an organization had something happen and they offered you a job and you accepted and something changed and all of a sudden they could not hire you anymore, they would have no problem telling you, I'm sorry, our policies changed, or COVID happened and we've had to lay off people, so we're not keeping, the offers that we've already extended. That they won't hesitate to do that if they need to do that for their bottom line. So these things are on here. what I would say is you want to try your best to avoid the situation. And I also know that most people don't go into a situation thinking, ooh, I'm going to accept an offer just so I can renege and hurt them. Like most people, I don't think anybody hopefully thinks that way, right? So do your best to know, that you want to accept an offer when you accept it. I understand that sometimes crazy things happen. I had someone think they were told they were out of a process with like their top company. They weren't being considered anymore. So they accepted another offer. And a month later, that top company came back and said, just kidding, we actually have an offer for you. That student ended up reneging, of course, because their dream company came back to them. And I can't necessarily, I understand it. I would say if those things happen or you find yourself in that situation, find one of us in the University Career Center to help talk you through it so you can do it in the best possible way so you don't necessarily leave a bad taste in an employer's mouth. And hopefully don't have a problem with burning bridges and things like that in the future. All right, so any questions about evaluating the job process before we get into salary negotiation? Jeffrey, did you get any?
Yeah, so one question that I got in the chat was about, and this you might address this kind of in the coming slides, so I'll let you decide whether you want to answer it now or later, but one individual asked that many big companies tend to set their salaries for entry-level employees like at the beginning, and so there's no room to negotiate that sort of entry-level salary. So they were wondering what you recommended in terms of what you can negotiate.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely right. Some organizations will decide this is where we bring people in at the entry level. This is the salary. We want everyone to make the same thing. And so there isn't necessarily room to negotiate salary. That's why that might be when you want to talk about some of the other things. So that could be, are they willing to offer additional days off? Is there, money for professional development, a relocation, bonus or something like that. In some cases, you may not be able to negotiate, but you can at least ask some questions and see if there is some room, like some wiggle room. And they might say no, but as long as you handle, and I'll talk about this more, but like as long as you handle the salary negotiation in the right way, in an appropriate, polite, professional way, if you ask for something and they can't give it to you, that doesn't mean that it's taken off the table. Like they're not going to be like, oh, you asked for more money, we can't give it, so you don't get a job anymore. That's not what happens. As long as everything's handled in a professional way, that initial offer is still on the table.
Awesome. Another question that someone asked is that should you ask about salary during the first interview?
No. That's a great question to ask because the answer is no, I wouldn't ask about it. Usually what you want to do is wait, especially past the first interview, because you don't want it to sound like that is your first or primary concern. That's something that I would wait, probably even like, I would say until if they haven't told you by the time they're offering the position, that's where I would ask. Just because the first person to ask is usually, they often say is like, can be the loser. I don't think that's always true, but if you ask, especially in a first interview, what's the range for this salary? They will probably come back to you and say, okay, well, what range are you looking for? And they'll see if they can work with your range, which usually you want to hear what they think is a fair salary for their position. And like I said, definitely not the first. I think you could do it, if you had a second, more lengthy interview, potentially if you wanted to, but I would not do it for a first interview. The first interview is really just to get to know you and to get to know them. That's a great question.
Cool. So some of the other questions I think might be answered in the next few slides. All right. We'll let you go forward with them. Yeah.
We'll move forward then. All right. So salary negotiation, what to do. I kind of talked about this a little bit with asking for more time when they make you an offer, but this is also true, not just in deciding, but like when they make you the initial offer, like buying yourself some more time. So I've been in the position where someone calls and they make you a job offer and you were just so excited because this is the organization you really wanted to work for, or you've had a lot of interviews and it's just nice to hear somebody wants to hire you, a lot of different reasons. It's nice to be wanted, right? So having someone reach out and offer you a job is exciting, whether it's your top company or it's your fifth company, right? But buy yourself some time. Really don't be careful not to let that excitement of being offered a job get carried away to the point where you're immediately accepting on that phone call. So when they call and they offer you a job, you want to thank them, tell them that you're excited about the offer, and find out when they want to have an answer from you. Now, ideally, hopefully, we'd like to think that they'd give you a couple of weeks to decide. But I will say that that is more typical of like a straight out of undergrad position, and typically bigger organizations that might give you more time. As you move in your career, they might give you a week. Like they might call you on a Friday and say, you can have the weekend. Like you're not going to have a ton of time typically to decide. Now is the time when you're probably going to have the most amount of time because you're getting these offers in some cases starting the summer before you even graduate, but even the fall, depending on what, field you're going into. But even if you were to have the offer offered to you in the spring, you will probably have the most time, more than you ever have in your career, to like give yourself some time to think about it because they know you're a student and they know you have a lot to consider. So buy yourself some time, find out when you need to let them know, because that helps you then when you're not on the phone, have a clear head, be excited, but not necessarily accept right away. Not that you have to play it cool and act like you're not going to accept, because I wouldn't do that either, but you don't want to accept right away because then you lose all negotiation power. Once you say, yes, I'm taking the job, they know that you want the position. It's harder to negotiate. You also want to think carefully about what they're offering and what you're interested in. We're going to talk more about these in a moment. Do your homework. It's important to do some research and know what that salary range is, which we talked a little bit about, and then have a strategy as you go into the conversation. So as I mentioned, buy yourself some time, thank them. That's so important. Even if you don't end up taking the job, you want them to think that you were just such a gracious professional person and they're bummed that, you didn't accept their offer, but maybe in the future you would. So thank them, being professional, tell them how excited you are about this offer, and ask for time to consider the offer. They're, for the most part, going to have no problem with this. It's going to be the amount of time maybe that's negotiated, but most employers are going to know that you're not going to accept first thing right away the second they call. So think carefully. Some reasons why you should negotiate. You can realize that I have not updated this since the pandemic. So it may be a little less of a seller's market these days, depending on what industry you're in. There are certainly some industries where that is still true. But what I mean by this is you know that they want you. They're offering you a job. So they want your skill set. And in some fields, you can kind of control that, because if there are less qualified people for those positions, then positions are open, you have a little bit more room to get what you want in a negotiation. As I mentioned, you have more leverage for negotiation before you accept that offer. So definitely keep that in mind. And while you may not get everything you want, or you may not get anything additional, you won't get any of those things unless you ask for it. So it is worth asking. Some reasons not to negotiate, although I'm going to debunk all of them, so you'll just know that you should negotiate. If you don't have enough information to know what's appropriate, if you don't have the information to know what's appropriate to ask for, you shouldn't negotiate, which is why research is so important. So you do have that information and you can still negotiate. I say this because if they offer you, 50,000 and you come back and say, well, I don't think that's fair, I think a fair range is 100,000, you've just doubled what they said they were going to offer you. This is an extreme example. I think most people know they shouldn't, but that is such an extreme switch. Or even if you went from 50 to 70, if the real range isn't really in 70, like if they weren't, giving you a really low number to begin with, you coming back and expecting to get 20,000 more than they offered shows that you don't know the range and the work that you're doing. And so that can hurt you. Like I said, you're going to do all the research, so you're going to know this information so you can still negotiate. If you're not comfortable with negotiating, get comfortable. Practice, talk to somebody at the University Career Center, talk through what you want to say, what you're going to ask, do your research so you feel confident that you have the numbers and the information to have that conversation. Practice if you want with one of us in the Career Center, we would do it. Or just talk it through with you in your head until you feel more confident about what you want to say. Make notes if you want when you call, all that kind of stuff. But really find a way to get confident, because again, if you don't ask, you're not going to get it. And then of course it can backfire if it's not done correctly. Well, we're talking about it now, so you're going to do it correctly. But really the big thing is not over asking, being professional, not being so overly confident that you get to arrogant, right? As long as you do it in a professional manner and you are polite and appreciative of what is being offered, even if the answer is no, again, that offer won't be rescinded at that point. If you came in and said, well, I'm so great and you'd want to hire me and you'd want to give me this extra money because of the skills, and like you're really going over the top, that's where it can backfire and they can be like, we don't really need you. But you're here and you're learning about this. So obviously you want to know more about salary negotiation and you wouldn't do those things. All right, so some personal factors that could affect how you negotiate and things that you consider while you're negotiating. Other offers, right? If you have one offer, how you negotiate and whether you're willing to accept less than maybe what you wanted might change. Then if you had 5 offers at the same time, you might decide that one organization is not worth going with because they can't give you more of what you want, another one can. The skill and experience that you bring to the position can be a negotiating factor. If you think that you are, a lot more skilled or experienced than they initially asked for, and you think that you can bring more to the position, or you bring a specific, very special skill, that could be a way to potentially ask for more money and say that you think you're worth a little bit more money in the salary negotiation process. Living expenses, cost of living, commute. If you are, talking to them and you want to talk about how you already have an offer, a similar offer that maybe is the same amount, but in an area that has a lower cost of living, you could point out that you have a competing offer, but you could live somewhere where the cost of living was lower and that money would go further. So you think that with their organization, that salary range you were thinking for that location should have been a little higher. These can be kind of things that you use when talking with a recruiter or your hiring manager, whoever's doing that negotiation process with you. So some employer factors. One we already talked about, salary practices for that organization. They could, have a practice of saying, we start all our entry level people in this position at this amount. We want them all to make the same. We don't budge. That could just be their standard practice. Comparative salaries for the field, if they know what their competition is paying in their region or their city, and they know that they're comparative, they may, not want to move it. If they know that they're a little lower, it may be easier to get them to come up. If they know that they're higher, it's going to probably be hard to get them to go up if they know they're already paying more than other people in the area. The available budget, that's a huge thing. If they have the money to give you a little bit more, and they want your skill set and they've made you a job offer, so they want your skill set, they might be able to give you a little bit more. But if things are really tight, it may be harder to give a little bit more in the salary area. Salary levels for similar positions, they're going to keep an eye on that too. They won't want someone coming in with less experience and making 10,000 more than someone in a very similar position who's maybe been there longer, because that can hurt them with the employees they already have. The experience level of the HR rep or whoever you're negotiating can also be a factor. If they feel more comfortable and confident with negotiating, they are probably more likely to want and be willing to have that conversation with you. If they are not as comfortable with it, they may shut down or tell you that, there isn't as much room to negotiate because it's not something that they personally feel comfortable with. Or it might mean that they have to go to someone above them to ask for the permission to negotiate, or if there's more money. Like, there's a lot of different things to think about there. The level of need. If this is a unique problem that they have or a position that requires a really uniquely qualified candidate and you are that candidate, they're going to want to keep you. If they're having a hard time filling that position, it's been a while, they're going to want to keep you. If this is a position that they could hire a number of people to do, it's something that turns over often and they usually don't have trouble finding people, that will make them less motivated to negotiate and give more than they want. The other thing to think about too is some organizations will specifically start somewhere knowing that you will probably ask for a bump in salary and that you might be looking to negotiate. So another reason to potentially negotiate is they might be purposely coming to you a little less than they're willing to pay because they know that you will ask for a little bit and then they can give you a little bit more. So keeping that in mind when you're deciding whether to negotiate or not is important. But like I said, everyone should negotiate because you won't get what you don't ask for. All right, so doing your homework, this is huge. Like I said, negotiating is all about doing it the right way, being professional, but you also have to have the numbers to back it up. You know, going to an organization and saying, you know, I was really thinking that salary was going to be in this range a little higher. Is there room to move it? Like if you don't have the way to kind of back that up and say, this is why I think I should get more, it's going to be a little harder. So we talked about Glassdoor, Occupational Outlook Handbook that is put together by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They have some salary ranges. It's good to keep in mind that with that, it usually does it for the whole country. So if you're looking at an area that is either one of the really low cost of living or high cost of living, the number may be a little off because it is going to be an average across the entire US. But it's worth looking at least getting an idea. Classmates and alumni I mentioned earlier. NACE is the organization I mentioned earlier. We have that salary survey available in the center. What I would recommend is if you are a CM&S major, reaching out to me. If you're one of the other colleges, you could reach out to your program director or even just to the main career center and someone can find that information for you in the salary survey since we are not, our doors are open, but we have very, very limited staff right now in Hornbeck. But we can get you that information. And then we also have the University of Maryland graduation survey. So this is for bachelor's degree recipients. So if you're a master's or PhD, we're not currently collecting that data. But if you want to know based on your major, like the bottom 25%, and you know the middle 50%, or even the top 25%, we can give you an idea of what people are making with your major. If you are so lucky as there's someone else that is looking at an organization or that you're looking at an organization that someone else has gone to and they gave us salary data, we might be able to see raw data for that. But that is not the main, some people give us salary information, but not like, we don't have every organization represented. So we may not have that detail for you, but you could always try. And again, that's something where you talk to someone in our office and we could look that information up for you. In that case, it's going to be really helpful, again, if you go through someone who represents your college or school. And then cost of living is something that you're going to want to think about. There are a number of different cost of living calculators out there. You can literally Google it and find a ton, but these are two that I've used before that can give you an idea of comparing two different offers in two different cities and how they might stack up. Like how, you know, does 50,000 here equals 60,000 in this city? Or what would you need to make in one city to equal what you can make in another? Okay, have a strategy with the negotiation process. Again, you want to go in with a plan. Take stock of the research that you've done into salary ranges. Reflect on what you'd be willing to take. Usually you want to think about, and I say here, establish your floor and your ceiling. Know before you go into that conversation, what is the lowest amount that you would be willing to take that position for? So if you know that you need at least 60,000 to even say yes, I would recommend going in and not saying I'll take between 60 and 70, because then they're going to come at you right at 60 because that's the lowest. If you know 60 is where you would take it, then maybe you ask for 65. So that way, if they say 65, you're a little above and maybe you can, you know, move up from there. But you need to know what that floor is, because you don't want to give them a range and you say, 55 to 65 and they offer you 55 and you're like, oh, I don't really want it for 55. Make sure that you know what your lowest is. And likewise, know what your ceiling is. Is there some amount of money that if an organization offered it, that you would take that job immediately? It wouldn't matter what the other details are. You'd be willing to. And maybe there is, maybe there isn't. And maybe it's a realistic number and maybe it isn't. But at least knowing what those numbers are, I think is really helpful. Craft a thoughtful counteroffer. If you feel most comfortable through email, that's fine too. Don't feel like you have to do it over the phone. You can. I think in either situation, they may have to check with someone else before they can accept a negotiation anyway. So if you feel more comfortable crafting that in an email than doing it over the phone, that's fine. Again, I mentioned sending it before the response deadline, because you don't want to be on the day you're supposed to be accepting it, sending them an email saying, actually, I want to counter that offer, or I want to negotiate and talk more about other options, when they were expecting, again, to hear from you a yes or a no. This could now delay their process, because now you've reached out to them on the 15th and you want to change the terms and they need to go back to someone else. This now means that the process can get delayed. So if you're going to negotiate, you don't want to do it, the second they call you, but you also don't want to wait till the very last minute of the deadline either. Typically, you will conclude the negotiation over the phone or potentially in person. So what could start as a back and forth through email, you might eventually, verbally over the phone or in person, agree to that before they send you something written to sign even. If an agreement is not reached, let's say you ask for more money and they can't, you could always come back and see if you could buy yourself some more time. Say, well, since we can't reach an agreement salary-wise, could I have a little bit more time to think about this as other offers come in? That's another option. Try not to drag it out. If you have made a decision and you know that you're not interested, let them know. If you've made a decision and you do want to accept it, let them know that too. They will appreciate it if they know sooner rather than later that you aren't interested, because it means they can go to their list and get the next person on the backup and offer to them. Because the more time you give them, the more time that they have to get other people. Because if you drag it out and don't accept that offer, they're losing time when they could be offering to other people who are also getting other offers. So do what's best for you, but like I said, let them know when you know. And of course, express gratitude, even if it doesn't end in you working for them. Appreciating the process and what they've done and that they offered you a job in the first place is great. Leave it on a positive note. You never know when you might apply to work there again someday, because you've gotten a little bit more experience and they have a different job open that you're interested in applying to. But even if you can't come to an agreement and ultimately you decide not to accept the position, thanking them for offering it in the first place is a really good way to remain professional. All right. So I'm sure there's more questions.
Yes, we have lots of good questions coming in.
Good.
So I'm very happy to see you all engaged with this. So I'll just kind of go through them in the order that they kind of came in the chat. So one question that came in is, how would you go about answering questions on like an online application if it asks you what your expected salary is for the position that you're applying for?
I hate those. I just want to acknowledge I hate those. I think, and maybe this is the career services talking to me, I would love it if organizations just normalized giving salary ranges and being upfront and honest about it instead of playing games, but that's not the world we live in. I would say if an application is asking for a salary range, I would try to do some quick Googling, searching Glassdoor, and getting an idea of what that position would typically hire at, and give them a range. And you can give a big range. Like, you don't necessarily have to say like, a 2,000 range. You could give a 10,000 range that kind of gives you, some space. Sometimes they will ask for an exact number. Those I really hate. But just try to think of something that you think is fair for the experience that you have and for the position and what they would do. If they try to hold you to that and you feel like after interviewing that what you initially put in there wouldn't be a fair offer to you, I think you could have that conversation where you say, later on, that is a number I put down before I knew everything about the position. Now that I know more and know that there is a lot greater responsibility and skills and experience needed, I actually think that, my salary range is here or my expected salary is here. Because that's something you can always come back to if they do ask you early on and then you feel later like you might have given them too low a number. You can always tell them that, after hearing more about the position, you actually think that it requires a higher salary because there's more responsibility and commitment.
Someone, as a follow-up to the question, said, if you're allowed to type in something other than numbers into that field, can you say willing to negotiate?
I think you can. They might still come back and ask you what range you are. I'll be honest. Well, all right, it's been a little while since I filled an application, but lots of times they require it to be a number because they can. But yeah, if you can type in anything, you could say willing to negotiate. You could even give them a number and say, but you're willing to negotiate, given the right terms. I've heard, like a little easier in interview than, typing sometimes, but like saying that, whatever they think is fair and reasonable for that position in this market. Like I've heard people comment and give that their salary range would be one that is fair and reasonable to the work in the market that they're applying to. It's just a weird game. And it sounds like, I realize I've been talking about this and it just sounds like, employers are trying to get you for as cheap as they can. And to some extent that is true. At the same time, any good employer isn't going to want to completely lowball you, because if they do that and you find out that you could have made, or that your coworkers make 20,000 more, you're not going to want to stay there because you're not going to trust them and you're not going to feel good about them because they were willing to give you so much lower. So for the most part, I like to think that while they are trying to keep costs low, they want to give you a fair salary at the end of the day, because they won't get their money out of you if you realize that you were given such a low salary, because you'll look to go somewhere else because you will feel burned. So know that they're in a tough place because they are trying to, use their money efficiently, but that they also, if they've made you an offer, they do want you to come on. And so they're going to try to help meet what you're asking if they can.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. Another question that someone is asking is, do companies usually ask candidates to put out a salary offer first, or will they state a salary and essentially you just have to start negotiating from there?
So it depends on the organization and maybe even the recruiter, they do it differently. If it's in the job, if you've gotten to the point where it's the job offer and they haven't talked about salary or they haven't asked you about salary, then they should give you a number because they're making a job offer. So they need to say, this is the job, we want to offer it to you. This is what we want to pay you. But before that, of course, it could happen where in an interview or an email or in the application, even they could ask you, what your range is or what you're hoping to get. Sometimes if they're a really nice employer, they will put that into the job description and give you a range, but it all depends. You see kind of people all over the map. Someone sent me a resource and I'm assuming that means that Divya is fine with me sharing it as well. So I'm going to send it out to everybody. If you're looking specifically at software development, I appreciate this as an extra resource. I'm just copying and pasting it and sticking it there. So if you're looking at software development positions, this is another resource that someone has found helpful. Thank you for sharing that. Obviously, that won't help everybody with their salary negotiation, but some people. I'm sure on here. I'm also going to share, if you didn't get to do this at the very beginning of the presentation, if you would register really briefly, just go to that link. You'll type in the access number and then your UID number, just so we know who's joined us today. I would appreciate if you would take a moment to do that if you haven't already. Jeffrey, are there other questions?
Yes, we definitely have more questions.
I'm here. Let's go.
So one question someone asked is like, what do you do if you notice that there's a gap between an offer that they give you like over the phone and then the number that you see on the actual offer letter?
Oh yeah, yeah. You definitely want to ask about that, because the actual offer letter, like the physical copy, is what's going to be typically the one they hold you to, because that's the one you're signing versus the verbal agreement. So I guess if the number on the paper is higher, not as much of a stressor, but like, let's say they offer you one number and you come back and the one on the paper says less, then I would reach out to who your contact is. And don't act like, you're going to come at them, and you're not going to want to come at them in an aggressive way. Like, hey, we said this and now you change it to this. You're just going to come like you normally would and said, say, hey, thank you so much. I got the offer letter, but I noticed that it was a little lower than what we talked about. When we spoke on the phone, we said this. When I got it, it actually said this. So can you provide, chances are it's just a typo, or they forgot what they said to you. But yeah, if that physical paper offer letter comes in lower, you can absolutely have that conversation, because you can just talk to them about how you thought you had agreed on this number, but this was lower. So what happened? Or, was it just, or you play dumb if you want and say, hey, I think this was mistyped because we said this number and this number came to me. Chances are that's all it is anyway, but that's what I would do. I would definitely have a conversation.
Awesome. So this question is specific for positions working for the government. So do government agencies have any room for negotiations, or are their compensation packages more rigid?
There is some room. So there's some like structure in that with the federal government, benefits are all going to be the same, of course, right? But within the federal government, there are, different salary levels, grades. You might hear someone say they're a GS7 or a GS9 or whatever. So what those are basically salary ranges. And so if your position is a GS7, there's a certain amount of money that you can't make lower than this or higher than this. If you haven't seen the GS ratings, those are really, really big ranges, like very big. So it's not helpful when you look at them to say, oh, well, like, it's not like it's a 10,000, like it can be tens of thousands of dollars from. So, and lots of times in these GS levels, there are steps in between. And so you could start off in like one range, but then have the opportunity to move up to like the next slightly higher range. So there is some flexibility, because it's not like if you're a GS7, you have to make this amount. It means you have to make somewhere in this amount, which, like I said, can be a very large range. Depending on the organization, certainly that agency or department could be more rigid or more flexible when it comes to what they offer and if they are willing to negotiate, but they do have the ability within their ranges.
Awesome. So the next question is that, where did it go? Okay, so that if you notice like on Glassdoor or something that there's like a pretty wide range of like starting salaries, what would be a reasonable amount, like, or like a percentage increase you could reasonably ask for during the salary negotiation?
If there's a large range between starting salaries, assuming it's for first you're going to want to make sure that the position title is the same that you're applying to, or that they're the same to each other. Then I think it's time to evaluate where you feel like your skill set lies. Like if you feel like you are really good, hopefully we all have this healthy ego, right? where we all think we're a really good hire, and but like, no. Or do you feel like you're bringing in a really specific set of skills that maybe something or have a certain skill that's a little above what you think other people coming in at this level have, then maybe you'd put yourself a little higher. There isn't necessarily a set percentage, like there isn't like a hard and fast rule as far as saying, well, if they offer you 60, you can only go up to 6,000 more because it's 10%. Like there isn't a range. I think knowing what the range is and how far off, because here's the other thing, you could see a range and your offer could be in that range, but you could still want a little bit more if you can get it, and that's okay. I think it's just going to come down to maybe trying to find some secondary sources for a range and see, like, are you seeing just 2 and 1 is here and 1 is here? Or are you seeing 4 and 3 are here and 1 is here, and knowing you're probably closer maybe to this one number wise, because the average is going to be closer to those 3 than that one higher one.
Awesome. Another question, I think this is very relevant. So this individual asks if there's anything we should do differently to negotiate salaries during the pandemic than we would do before the pandemic.
I think it's the same. I think being understanding if there isn't as much room to move your salary up right now might be something. Like I said, doesn't mean they can't, because as you know, some organizations are really thriving right now, Amazon, Zoom, and some organizations may not be. So just because of the pandemic and the state of the economy, some fields won't be feeling that, some will be feeling it a little bit more. I think not just salary negotiation, but job offer negotiation in general. Questions I might ask, go back to that considerations page at the very beginning where I said asking about working from home or remote work. Let's say you can work from home, but they expect you to supply, or you think that they'd expect you to supply, the things that you need. So your own laptop or your own headset if you wanted one, things like that. Maybe that's an area where you could negotiate and have them supply, because they would supply your computer if you were there in person. I knew someone who negotiated to have her cell phone bill covered because the work that she was doing, she had to have a phone number for people to be able to reach her, and she was using her cell phone. And so she got the organization to pay her cell phone bill every month. So that might be where something could potentially be negotiated in a different way, especially now. I think that could be negotiated even without a pandemic and working from home, but it's another thing to consider. But yeah, I think you can still negotiate. I think just sticking to the regular rules of being professional about it. Worst case scenario, they say no, and you just take the original offer if you're still interested in it.
Great. One question I think it had to do with I didn't see this one while we were going through it earlier, but like going back to some of the salary resources slide, they were wondering if the salary survey, which I'm guessing is the one that was on the NACE website, is from spring 2020, or like is the information there from after the pandemic kind of grew in the United States?
So typically, and even with our graduation survey, it takes time to collect that data after students have offers. So like right now, I don't have the 2020 graduation survey because it takes time for us to get everyone to fill out the survey or to reach out to them and get more information. And so typically for those that graduated this past May, we won't have that survey and that report done until like next January, February, like it's almost a year. NACE similarly gets their data from us because we share it's employers and it's colleges that share their information with NACE that helps them build their salary survey. So it's probably a year out. I would not imagine that they have pandemic related salary data at this point. They might move a little faster than us, but I wouldn't think that they have it just yet, at least not concrete numbers.
Got it. Someone is asking if there's a way to know if the company says that they're just like, is there a way to know if a company is just saying that, oh, it's standard to offer this position, this amount of salary, or to know if like that's like actually how they go about operating their salary
That's their practice. What I would say is if they, when they're offering you, they say, this is what we start everybody at. I would say you could still kind of maybe come back and ask if there isn't a little bit of wiggle room. But if you're asking for wiggle room and they say, no, this is our standard, we start everyone here, then I would assume, and God, I hope that that is true. A way to know if that might be true is to kind of do some research, look at some of the salary guides. I'll be honest, I've also heard students talk about looking at Reddit to look at certain organizations and see if they're kind of saying and hearing the same thing about, I mean, that's really going to work for big organizations. That's not going to work for smaller ones, of course. But for really big names that most people recognize, that might be helpful. But I think other than word of mouth or Glassdoor, I would hope that that's not something they would lie about, because I would think that that's something that could get found out really easy and could really be a PR nightmare for them. But sure, I guess it's possible that they could say that and it not be true.
I think the last question that I have here, I'm not sure if I'm understanding it the way that the person intended it, but I'll just go ahead and kind of tell you what's written here. Do you have any tips for what to do if we receive competing offers but are waiting to hear back from a preferred company, particularly for the case where said preferred company does not provide a contact email?
Okay, so I think I understand what this is asking. I'm going to rephrase the question, and if I got it wrong, send Jeffrey another message. Let him know I got it wrong. But the way I'm taking it is you're getting one offer, and you have an application in with another organization, but it sounds like you haven't gotten far enough along where you have a contact there. You might have just applied and you haven't had an interview yet, so you don't have a name and an email and someone to reach out to. In that case, with that preferred company, it sounds like you're earlier in the process. If you haven't had that first interview yet and don't have a contact name and email, phone number, that kind of thing, it's going to be a little harder, because if you're already getting an offer for this company and you even haven't had an interview for this one yet, then it's probably going to be hard to catch this one up, especially if you haven't had an interview. To not have an interview and then to reach out and say, like, hey, how long is this process going to be? When am I going to know if I got it? Like, you still have probably at least two interviews to go. So the fact that it might then speed track that would be hard. I think it's easier to move people into giving you an offer and speeding up to catch up to initial offer when you've already had your two interviews and you're just waiting to hear. It's a little easier to get them to make their decision a little faster. In that case, it might just be a gut decision. It may be asking for more time from that original organization, or it might be deciding whether you're willing to let that position potentially go in the hopes of this other one, which is hard to do if you haven't had more interviews. But if you're still applying to a bunch of positions, I would think if that preferred organization didn't work out, another one would somewhere. But it may just be a gut decision and at that point.
Got it. So this is the last question, since I know we're at about time now. The last question that's come in is, should you leverage the fact you have offers from other companies when negotiating?
You can. Sometimes it works, sometimes they're not as concerned with it. I think it can help sometimes if you can use it as a comparison. So if you have three offers and the one that you're really excited about and the one you really want is offering you less money, then you could say, I have 2 other offers that are similar in work, similar in location, and they're offering me X number of dollars more. Can you meet that offer? Then, like, if you're trying to get them to meet an offer, I think that's the way to do it. Especially if they are like your number one choice, and they're the one that's like lower. If you're hoping they'll beat the other 2 offers, you just have to be careful, because if they ask you what those 2 offers are offering, and you were hoping to get more than that, that potentially could be hard. You could also wait and not use it initially and try to negotiate. And if that doesn't work, then mention why you were trying to negotiate, that you had 2 other offers that were offering more, but this one was the one you were most excited about. But yeah, they can sometimes be helpful. Just kind of remembering that if they're in different locations, one could be offering more because there's the cost of living in that area is higher. I did work with a student a couple of years ago that was trying to get a position to come up because it was significantly lower than his other offer, but his other offer was in an area that was in a significantly more expensive area. So it was, I don't think he ultimately ended up getting the other one to come up as much as he wanted. I think they did come up a little bit. So that's something.
Great. Those are all the questions that came in through the chat.
Cool. I'm going to answer. Someone asked in the chat to me if this will be posted anywhere. Yes, this will be up on our YouTube page in a couple of days. So if you want to see the recording, that will be posted. If anyone here thinks of a question later, feel free to reach out to Jeffrey or myself. And then last but not least, if you didn't see the link yet to just register and say you were here, please do that. It takes 2 seconds. But otherwise, thanks for joining us. And even if you're not in CMNS, like if you have a question regarding this as a follow-up, please feel free to reach out. I may end up connecting you with my colleagues who work in your college, but I'm happy to answer questions from any students. All right. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy your evening. Someone asked the YouTube channel. That's smart. It's UMD Career Center. The other thing is, if you RSVP'd for this, not just that you went in and grabbed the link, but if you actually RSVP'd in Careers for Terps, I will send out an email once it is on the YouTube page to let people know what's up.